Hi, welcome. Today we've got Mark Helsel, the founder of US Elite Baseball. Appreciate you spending some time with us today.
Great to be here, Marty. Thanks for having me.
Sure. So, as you're set up there at the sports bar, I appreciate you taking some time to share your background. You're a name that most people are familiar with in the travel world. Can you talk a little bit about your background and the evolution, how things kind of came together? I mean, we could spend a whole hour just talking like pre-US Elite. It's pretty interesting, but maybe you could summarize that and tell us how you got here.
Yeah, I think about this often. If you were to ask any of my high school buddies, fast forward to Mark's 57, what's he doing? I don't think any of them would be surprised at what I'm doing, because I grew up loving baseball. I was a baseball junkie. I wanted to play in the major leagues. I had a goal to play professional baseball, obviously. Fell a little short of that, but I did have a goal to play Division I baseball, and I got to do that. I played for a little mid-major in Macon, Georgia, called Mercer University. As a high school junior, I'd never heard of a Mercer University, but, I got down there and had a great 4 years. I got to play some great competition and got to play with great kids. I loved my teammates, loved my coach, which, looking back at that, Marty, probably fuels my passion today to help these kids that we're helping have the same kind of experience that I had, because it was, lifetime friends and playing baseball at a high level. It was really an amazing 4 years. After college, I didn't get drafted. And this is kind of significant to the foundation of US Elite. When I didn't get drafted, I literally sat on the couch for a couple days and moped. I'll admit, one of the few times in my life that I literally just kind of moped. But after about 2 days, you can only mope so long. I wrote myself a letter, and that letter was very inspiring to me, because I said, you know what? I've set a lot of goals and I've developed a lot of habits, and now I'm going to apply those habits that I learned from sports in my new business career. So I had a couple of jobs out of college and did well with those, and then started my first business at 26. I'm 57, so that's a long time to be self-employed, but I've enjoyed that freedom. But here's the main point to your question. How did that get me to US Elite? I love baseball. I love kids. I love competition. I love travel, and I love business. My wife said to me one day, she said, you have finally combined everything you love into one package. And she's absolutely right. So US Elite is a combination of all those experiences that I've had over the years.
So for those who don't know the full breadth, explain what US Elite Baseball is. So this is a true travel organization with a lot of different levels, a lot of different teams. Can you give us the once over as to the structure?
Well, no offense, but I would probably not call us a travel program. I would call us a player development program. I know for some that may just sound like semantics, but it's a big difference, because at US Elite, our motto, our slogan is uncommon standards. And, if you research us, you're not going to see us bragging about all the national championships we win. And, we talk about scholarships because that's what a lot of kids, they want that. So we have to demonstrate that. But at the end of the day, US Elite, the foundation of this program is about developing people while we get a chance to play baseball. If you think about that order, we're developing people, because again, my background is in personal development and leadership development. So I learned at an early age, being self-employed at 26, we had a saying, if it's going to be, it's up to me. Meaning I got to be good at what I do. I got to develop skills. So at US Elite, we talk a lot about the skill set, and we talk about life skills. And, there's things like accountability, commitment, integrity, character, honesty, preparation, communication skills, other-centeredness. Those are the core values that make up our program. And yes, we're playing baseball at a high level and kids are getting scholarships, but let's be real. At the end of the day, baseball is going to end for everybody. And I always say there's a whole lot of life left after baseball. So let's make sure we're preparing for that while we get to play baseball. That's who US Elite is.
So for our audience, you know, it's all focused on the actual recruiting process, which travel baseball is a huge part of. What does US Elite offer players and families in the terms of help in the specific recruiting process?
Well, you know, the E word, the buzzword in all recruiting is exposure. Everybody wants exposure. And we tell our players, you can be exposed in the wrong way. If you're exposed, you get exposure and you're not prepared for it. You can get scratched off a lot of lists pretty quickly. And I always say it's kind of hard to get back on those lists. So at US Elite, we're spending a lot of time with what we call the IDP, the Individual Development Plan. And that Individual Development Plan, again, is a core part of our program because at the end of the day, Marty, these kids are going to either get a scholarship or not get a scholarship based on their individual skill set. Now, we're all about team and commitment and, you know, playing as a team. But at the end of the day, teams don't get scholarships. Individuals get scholarships. So at US Elite, we spend a lot of time evaluating our players. That's number one. Then helping them understand, this is kind of foreign to a lot of people, what their real weaknesses are. Everybody likes to do what they're good at. There's very few people that are disciplined enough to practice what they're not good at. So at US Elite, we call that the yeah but. So if I'm watching a baseball game, college coach standing beside me and we're watching our shortstop and he says to me, man, I really like your shortstop, but whatever the but is means you're not getting a scholarship. He's not getting a scholarship, but his feet are too slow, but his arm isn't strong enough, but he's not physical enough, but his bat doesn't play. Whatever the but is, that's what we got to figure out how to improve. So when he's watching that kid play, he says, man, I really like your shortstop. Can you have him give me a call? That's what we're after. And that skill set, that individual skill set is what we need to focus in. And I think we do a really good job of that.
So one of the questions I'm getting a lot happens every fall. Hey, how do I choose a travel team? I'm looking for a travel team or to change a travel team. What are those things that parents who may not be very knowledgeable in the process, as they're looking for a travel team, what are some of the key things that they need to be doing either research-wise or in that conversation with a travel program to understand what's on the other side of that?
Ooh, that is a big question, and I'm going to try to give you my most concise answer, but there's a couple parts to it. Number one, if I'm talking to a parent, there's a different set of parameters, if you will, things that I would say a parent needs to be looking for. Some of them are the same things that a player looks for, but there's things that a player is going to look for that maybe the parent isn't necessarily focused on. So let me give you an example. If I'm a parent, I am a parent, I have 3 kids. I want my kids around stand-up people. I learned early in life, if you want to be successful, be around successful people. If you want to be in the 2% versus the 98%, find the 2%ers. That's what I did in business. I was always around successful people. So as a parent, I want my child and my children around people of integrity. I don't want bad influences. There's enough of them in life. I'm not going to willingly put them in a program where I'm not seeing exemplary behavior. If I'm a parent and I see behavior that I would never want my son to model, why would I put my son with that? So that's number one. Switch gears. Let's talk about the player. What does he need to look for? Well, first of all, it has to be in line with your goals. When my son was 12, the beginning of our program, my son looked at me at 12 years old and said, Dad, I want to play in the SEC. Well, we put a plan together so he was able to reach his goal and play in the SEC. So if a player has a goal to play, let's just say Division I baseball, he should be looking for a program that has been very successful at helping kids play Division I baseball. I see a lot of kids not knocking programs, but they're in programs that have never really, had a long track record of that kind of success, and yet they're trying to do it. So that's a little risky. So, parents, I would say the influence, is something really important. Kids, look for success that align with your goals. Those would be the two simplest answers I could give you, Marty.
So when you're talking with parents, you're putting those plans together. What are some of the mistakes that you see parents make in this process, either in the travel ball world or just in recruiting in general?
Well, we have a training program, Marty, in our program, just so you know how committed we are to these kinds of questions. We have a training program. It's called the VTS, the Video Training Series. We have one for parents, one for players, and one for coaches. In the parental side of things, there's about 32 videos. And here's some of the topics. This is the answer to your question. Number one, I remember doing this one, let them fail. A lot of parents have a real hard time letting their kids fail. They think this journey is about success, and it's really not about success. It's about failure. How well do you manage the failure? There's a saying, the parent's job is not to prepare the path for the child. It's to prepare the child for the path. When you think about that concept, a lot of parents struggle with that. They want to lay out the path for their kids, and that's not the way to go. So I see a lot of parents way too involved on that side of things. It's hard as a parent to watch your kid fail. It's hard to watch him. The college coaches are there and he's having a terrible day. That's hard, but it's also part of the process. That's number one. I see a lot of parents speaking for their kids. Big mistake. They need to let the kids learn to speak for themselves. I remember my first son was not a real gregarious kind of kid. He is now, but back then he wasn't. And I remember him talking to some college coaches, and I wanted to grab the phone and have the conversation for him. But you know what? I didn't do that. I let him figure it out. So parents, I think probably I could sum it all up by saying, let this process unfold naturally through the ups, through the downs. Don't try to figure everything out and orchestrate everything just the right way. Let the process unfold. That's what I would tell you. The biggest mistake parents are making is they're too involved.
So parents of players, they're making all kind of decisions. How big a role does picking the right travel team have in the outcome of whether a player gets an opportunity to play at the next level or whether he gets a scholarship opportunity? How big is the travel decision?
I think it's huge. I think there are more exceptions to that than there is the rule. So let me tell you what I mean. We play against teams all the time, and I will notice a player on the other team, and I'll either talk to the coach or I'll sometimes talk to the player. And one of the questions I ask is, who are you talking to? What college coaches? If he's 14, 15, 16, who are you talking to? Marty, so many times the answer is nobody. Nobody. I even had a high school coach one time. What's that?
Yeah, I get it a lot myself.
Yeah, and but I'm looking at that kid saying, if that kid's in our program, I am shouting from the rooftops about that kid. Let's face it, the old saying, it takes a village. Well, guess what? It does. There's a lot of people that have to get behind these kids. These college coaches don't just hear from one person and go, okay, I'll give them a scholarship. So when you have a group of people around you, and like in US Elite, we have many, many coaches that help our kids get recruited. College coaches are asking each of the coaches, hey, what do you think of him? What do you think of him? And so that really helps. But I guess my point is, I see a lot of kids not getting recruited on teams that we play that I always think if they were with us, the doors would be swinging wide open for them because they're good enough. So, a lot of people think, hey, if you're good enough, you get seen. I mean, that in the movies that might happen, some scouts sitting up in the stands, but it just doesn't work that way that much anymore.
So talk to me a little bit about the network and the communication process. You talked about talking with college coaches. A lot of parents and players don't have any idea how that works. They think, hey, no one can really call or talk to me till September 1st of my, down the road. What's the reality of how that communication process with coaches reaching out in the communication?
Well, in our program, it starts with a player earning the right that we will open our contacts, put our credibility on the line for those players. So I tell everybody, the jersey doesn't get you a scholarship. Putting on a U.S. Elite jersey or anybody's jersey, college coaches don't say, oh, I'm giving him a scholarship. He plays for U.S. Elite. What happens is, as U.S. Elite, the kid comes in, he earns that. And then we open the door. We pick up a call. I'll give you, you were talking about some stories. Here's a good one for you. We have a kid from Michigan named Jacob Morrison. And he's 6'7", 225 pounds, right-handed pitcher, 2022. I saw him pitch one day, I think it was one of his first times with us. And I'm like, oh my gosh, look at this kid. I mean, he looks like a big legger. So, during the game, I went up to his dad and I said, hey, I just want to introduce myself. And I did. We got to talking and I said, who's Jacob talking to? He said, nobody. Interesting. Okay. I went and watched him pitch a couple more innings. I knew this kid was going to be unbelievable. So I started making phone calls during the game. I went up to the guy after, the game wasn't even over yet. I said, hey, I got a couple calls lined up for Jacob after the game. I kid you not, Marty. Mark, his dad, had tears in his eyes. You know why he had tears in his eyes? Because that experience never happened to them before. But that's how fast it could happen. I have an obligation to college coaches. They want to know who we have, right? So if I don't tell them about 6'7" Jacob Morrison, they get mad at me. Like, hey, Mark, why are you hiding this kid from me? So I started reaching out. But that's exactly how it happens. And then, since then, he's probably talked to 20 college coaches because we opened the doors for him and, he's ready to go. That's how it usually happens in our program.
So tell me, it's kind of an open-ended question. When I say, hey, what's the dark side of recruiting? What comes to mind?
Well, the dark side, you hear a lot about over-recruiting. So, that's probably the most obvious, where people are, coming into a program and sometimes the commitment isn't that great on the side of the college coaches. They, kids will come in, they're not do well. They're out after a fall or 1 year. They're going to a JUCO. And I'm not trying to throw the colleges under a bus, but, they have to manage rosters and they're not always right. So what happens when they miss? Now some places are offering 4-year scholarships, but a lot of places it's still a 1-year scholarship. So, the kids, my son went to a school, he had 40 scholarship offers, Marty. He picked a school, started his freshman year, got hurt that summer, and they called him up and said, we don't have money for you. That was a devastating blow. After all these schools, and he picks one, and after 1 year they do that. And I'm not trying to throw anybody under the bus, but that's something you might not hear that much about, but it does happen. And again, when that happened to my son, I'm going to tell you exactly what I said to him. I said, Christian, you're at the crossroads of your career right now. You can either use this as the reason your career never took off, bash the coach that did it to you, have resentment, have animosity. You can take that road, or you can use this to fuel your motivation to a level you didn't even know you had. You have to decide which road you're going to take. Fortunately for him, he took the right road and ended up playing professional baseball. So, the adversity, overcoming the adversity.
So I'm going to go back to talk to me a little bit about the different teams that you have and how you guys manage the roster. Like, how many players do you keep? How many POs is there? Like a formula you try to stick to, and how's it all structured?
There is. We used to, be a smaller program. We used to have like, 8 or 10 teams. We had 75 teams last year. So those teams are formed differently, obviously, depending on the geographic location of the team. If you're in rural North Carolina, you may not have a national level team, if you're picking kids from a small community. So we have teams like that. We have teams that are what we call all state teams. Those are the best kids in the state that we can recruit. We have national teams where we take those kids from those state teams and let them play together on in a national event. But in just about every event, you ask about the formula that we really like, and this works so well, it's 4 outfielders, 3 middle infielders, 3 corner infielders, and 2 catchers. So if you think about that, you can keep 4 outfielders happy. You can keep 3 middle infielders happy, 3 corners, 2 catchers. If you have 3 catchers, you will end up having 3 unhappy catchers because it's hard to keep them all happy. As far as the pitchers, you look at that group of kids and you say, are any of these kids legitimate two-way prospect pitchers? If they are, you count them as a pitcher. If they're not, you have to have a lot of POs, a lot of pitcher onlys. So when we're inviting a kid to one of our, let's say our all-state team or our national team, we might say, you didn't make it as a position player, but we do have a spot to offer you as a pitcher only. Some kids are okay with that. Some kids aren't. But what we don't do is we don't steal innings from our pitchers with position players, and we don't steal at bats with pitchers from our position players. So, at the higher levels, people have to start figuring out, or we start helping them figure out what they are. That's how we form our teams.
So as you guys are setting up your teams and you're setting up your schedule and you're looking at events, can you tell me what type of events are your national teams going to, maybe some of the more state or regional teams, and how that's important to a parent when they're looking to make a decision, either for your team or another team, as to what events they're playing and where they're playing and how that impacts them?
Yeah, I mean, the kids that want to play, let's use the Division I category. The kids that want to play Division I, the college coaches at that level, they want to see these kids competing at a high level. They want to see them competing at the same level that they are. They don't want to hear about Johnny hit 580 back in, his high school team, because they know what that level is for a lot of kids. It's not nearly as high as the travel national level. So they love to see, these kids facing 90 plus and good sliders and good curveballs. How do you handle that? Because, if you hit 78 well, that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to hit 92 well. So they need to see that. Playing at these big national events, some of these games are really intense. They're really high energy, 2 really good teams going head to head. It feels like a college game. Well, the college coaches love to see that. The LSU coach said to me one day, he said, I had a parent say, sorry, Johnny didn't have a good game. He was a little nervous because you were there. And he said, that was the worst thing a parent could say to me, because I'm trying to figure out if this kid can play in front of 15,000 crazy Cajuns, So if he's nervous, one guy, he's probably not the guy for me. So seeing him on a bigger stage is a big deal to these guys. So, at that level, the regional teams, okay, they're going to get some exposure, but again, they're going to say, I want to see this kid play at a higher against better competition to really evaluate them.
And that needs to be part of that decision. Because some kids are state or regional recruits. They're not necessarily national recruits. So
right.
For them to go and get beat up at a national tournament and go 0 for 12 and not smell anything, and then be playing in front of all these other areas, they're just wasting money, right?
Well, it reminds me of a saying that somebody said one time, the fact that money doesn't buy you happiness is something that everybody wants to prove for themselves. Okay. So the fact that somebody says you're not a Division I player, everybody wants to go prove you wrong. So that's what they do. They all go, and at US Elite, you know, we use a little more discrimination against that, because I don't believe in expensive travel baseball. I really don't. And I feel like I'm wasting people's time and money by inviting them to certain things when I know it's not going to be a good fit. I remember years ago, we had a team of almost all Division I kids, but we had 4 or 5 kids that weren't. And literally after every game, I'm talking to college coaches. Inevitably, the parents come up to me and say, "Hey, I saw you talking to the Clemson coach. Did he say anything about Johnny?" And I'm like, no. And, you know, after every game, that gets old, you know, and it's like, oh, you know, and I feel like I was wasting their time. So try to match up the schedule with the talent level. That's the goal.
How do you talk a little bit about, just so parents can understand this, talk a little bit about playing time and what the difference between competitive tournaments and showcases and how that dynamic works?
Well, that's another thing, back to the parents. You know, they want to be involved sometimes on the playing time side, and in our program, they have no say. They don't really even get to talk much about it. I mean, we can have an open dialogue, but they're never going to influence playing time. So they need to back off that. I mean, when you only have 3 middle infielders, somebody's not in the game at any moment in time. But we don't really have too big of an issue with playing time in our program, because I always say, hey, we invited you. You know, you're on the team. You're one of 3 middle infielders. You know, we invited you to play. It's not like high school where kids are sitting the entire season and not getting in a game. You know, competitiveness, we're going to try to put the most competitive team on the field, you know, as the tournament goes on. I always say, hey, every game you're competing for that playing time, but we don't have like a starting team and subs. I mean, everybody at our and for the most part is a player, a contributing player. Showcases, we don't do a lot of showcases. We're not into that side of things as much anymore. You know, it just doesn't feel like real baseball. So it's not a big part of our culture.
So talk to me a little bit about the financial side. I mean, it's difficult. I mean, obviously for parents to kind of be prepared. What are the costs and the things that they need to be kind of thinking about as they're looking at travel? What are some of the questions they should be asking so they're full aware of what they're getting into with not just your team, any travel team? Yeah,
I mean, you know, you got player fees. You know, are the player fees in line with the value? You know, I've heard of player fees that were crazy high, you know, in other programs, and there was no value there. So, you know, that's something, you know, I think at US Elite, we offer, you know, we're not even at the higher end of the player fees, but I think we're offering way more value than what I see a lot of other programs offering. You know, obviously you got expenses, you got travel expenses, you got hotels, you know, those all factor into it. And again, this is the honest truth. I used to say this to my son all the time. Hey, I said, Christian, at any moment, one of 2 things happens, we're done with this. One, you don't want to do it, or you're not motivated to do it. It's over. I can't want this more than you. So, and he did a great job of always saying, you know, he was excited. He wanted to play. But some kids, do I have to get in the car and drive to another tournament? Okay, no, you don't. We're not going. Or I used to say, this is the real scary one. Christian, at any moment that I don't see the effort or the talent to go play at these things, we're not going to go. Like, we're not going to keep chasing the dream for, let's say, a Division I scholarship when you're a clear Division III player. We're just not going to spend all this money doing that. And so, you know, but if you do that, there is a return on the investment. I mean, I had 2 sons get scholarships, and my wife and I added up, and we saved over $150,000 on college tuition. So yes, there were expenses to get them places and things, but I think that's a pretty good return on investment. Sounds kind of corporate to say it like that, but analyzing why are we doing this? What are we spending money? Why are we spending it? Oh, because my son's really talented. He really wants this. He's got people that believe in him, and there's a good chance something good's going to happen here, and it's going to all come together.
And I tell you what, I tell everybody, some of the best times in my whole life I had with my son during those few summers where we played travel ball and traveled, stayed in hotels. It was just, there's a lot of bonding. You have a lot of those transitional conversations that happen as they become young men. And man, I wouldn't trade that time for anything, in the car and the car rides and the hotels and the pools and everything.
I agree with you. We just finished up down at Fort Myers. It used to be called Jupiter. They had it at Fort Myers this year, and it's the last event for a lot of parents and players. And I told them all, make sure you take a picture and make sure you understand this is the last moment of this era. And let me tell you what, there were a lot of tears flowing, because you're right. It's a special journey that parents and players can be on together if they do it right. And it's special. It's really special.
What are some of the changes you've seen, either good or bad, in travel baseball over the past few years?
Well, I'll tell you what, I asked that same question to Tim Corbin at Vanderbilt. And I'll tell you what his answer was, because it's the same answer I would have given. Kids in travel baseball do not understand what it's like to play on a team. They're not committed to teams. They jump around all the time. If they hear something they don't like, they go somewhere else, or they guest play all the time. And he said it's so hard to bring these kids into a culture like Vanderbilt sometimes, when it's 35 guys. That's it. And one team and one coach. And oh, by the way, he may get in your face, and you can't say, oh, I'm going somewhere else. That's probably one of the most disturbing trends I see in baseball, is there's so much moving around, and kids are not learning what commitment means. In fact, we have something in our program. If a kid wants to try out for us, we ask them directly, have you committed to anywhere else? If the answer is yes, we're not picking you. You've already committed. We're not going to ask you to renege on a commitment to play for us. So there's a few others, but that's the one that really gets me. It's like baseball is a commitment sport, and kids are not getting that.
How do you see the timeline for recruits? And maybe you could put them into buckets, like Power 5 guys, small D1s, and then kind of the D2, D3 JUCO guys. What's the time frame? Because a lot of parents, they see one kid, from their local area or whatever, he commits early, and everybody starts to panic a little bit. Can you talk a little bit about where, kind of on average, where you see those guys making those commitments and getting offers?
You're right. I mean, especially with the early commits, there's 24s that are committing right now, 2024 grads. In our program, the vast majority of kids that are going to be committing next are 2022. We've tried to slow it down a little bit. Now, we've had a lot commit, but, next summer, there'll be incoming seniors. They're gonna be a lot of those kids committing next summer. So time-wise, we're a little bit later than a lot of these programs. We're not trying to push our kids out there and commit early. You're an 8th grader, you need to commit. It's ridiculous when you think about that. They haven't even played high school baseball yet, and they're making a 40-year decision. So I'm not a big fan of early commits. It's happening. People do get excited about it, but if you're a good player, let the process unfold naturally. And, I never push the panic button. We've got 21s right now that we're working toward, and I'm 100% sure they're going to find a home, and they're in their senior year. So let the process unfold naturally.
How do you deal with expectations in the travel baseball world? So I'm a parent, I'm paying some money. I think things should be working this way. How do you avoid, or how should parents deal with missed expectations with either a travel program or a coach? What should they be doing?
Well, first of all, it gets back to the parents' involvement. I can promise you every single parent is going to have zero say at the college level. Zero. So at US Elite, one of my favorite things to ask our players is, how many of you want to play Division I baseball? They all raise their hands. I said, then is it okay if I start treating you right now like a Division I player? So you start learning how it feels to be a Division I player. And mom and dad, is it okay if I start treating you like a Division I parent, because you need to be prepared for that? And if the answer is no, it doesn't work in our program. If the answer is yes, parents aren't that involved. The expectations are, I'm trusting you with my son. I could have gone to lots of places, but I'm trusting you with my son. And I always say, you have to let go. If you're trusting us, you have to let go. And that's hard for some people. And some people literally can't do it. And those people don't make it in our program, and they sure don't make it in college if they even try that.
Yeah, I try to talk to parents like, this is your pursuit of a travel team and how you deal with the coaches and the organization there. It's the best test pilot for actually dealing with college coaches that you can. So let your son do some of the talking. Let your son communicate with the coaches and do that. They've got to learn. Why not learn in this venue rather than the first time they're talking for themselves? They're sitting across from, Power Five, a guy that they've only seen on TV.
That's part of the development. You're 100% right. It starts now so we can see how you're going to handle this. Because let me tell you what, if we have a nightmare parent, you think I'm going to introduce them to a college coach? They're going to hate my guts. Mark, why'd you tell me about these people? They're headaches. So the parents and the players have to learn. They're in the prep phase, preparation for the next level. We got to start pretending right now that it's there, and we'll see how you act. We have curfews, we have assignments, we have, like I said, the video training series. It's all part of that preparation for the next level. Can you imagine going through this with none of that and then get hit in the face with everything that these people are going to get hit with at the next level if they even get there? That's scary.
So tell me a little bit about what advice you would have. So I'm a parent or a player. Maybe I'm just getting out of middle school, or I'm just starting high school in the recruiting process. What's some advice? Maybe not travel baseball advice, but what's some good recruiting advice?
Well, I'll give you I'll give you a few. First of all, rip up your list of excuses. I had a guy literally do this to me when I was starting in my business career. He said, tell me all the reasons why this isn't going to work. I'm like, really? Sounds kind of negative. He said, yeah, tell me all the reasons it's not going to work. I did. He got it. He said, now rip it up. And I ripped it up. He goes, good, we're done talking about that. And he was, a multi-millionaire, successful guy. And I think about, if you're in baseball, rip up all the list of excuses. Nobody wants to hear them. They're all equal. They all will lead you down the wrong road. So I'm going to get there. I got a plan. That's another thing a lot of kids don't have. They don't have a plan, a map, a goal. There's a big difference between a dream, close your eyes, hope it comes true, and a plan and a goal, and evaluate as you go. Focus more on your individual skill sets than anything. Again, teams don't get scholarships. College coaches are evaluating your skill set. What do you do that makes me want to pay your way to school? That's the question I ask our players all the time. How many of you have a scholarship? And or I might say, how many of you don't have a scholarship offer? And they raise their hand. I go, have you asked yourself why? Because there's a reason that somebody isn't saying to you, I got to have you. So I help our guys start understanding, what are you going to do better than 98% of the other players? Is it a lefty pickoff move that shuts down a running game? Is it you are the best defensive catcher in the country? Do you have a off-speed pitch that nobody can hit? Are you the most incredible base runner on your team? Do you get jumps in center field better than 98% of center fielders? We could go on and on and on, but there has to be something. You can't just be a pretty good little player. You're not getting a scholarship if you're a pretty good little player. So those are some things, Marty. I mean, every one of these questions is great, but there literally could be an hour training on each one.
What do you find most rewarding and most challenging about the travel baseball world?
By far, the most rewarding is watching kids develop as young men, for me. We have kids come into our program, you know, shy, introverted. And I always say, look, that's not a success trait. You know, being quiet and standing over in the corner, not talking to anybody is not the way this is going to work out for you. So we start pushing them. And I've watched kids morph. I've watched kids that weren't very good students, but we said, if you think you're a competitor, I want to see you compete in the classroom. And all of a sudden the kid goes from a 2.7 to a 3.6, graduates with honors. You know, those are stories in our program that really fire me up because it's life-changing. You know, getting a scholarship is awesome. That's exciting. But watching somebody who wasn't a good communicator turn into a communicator, watching a kid that wasn't a good student, watching a kid that was super self-centered. We've had kids come into our program that were so selfish. And all of a sudden they hear about other-centeredness and, you know, playing for something bigger than yourself. And you watch that kid develop as a young man. That's easy, my number one.
What about the challenge? What do you find the most challenging?
The most challenging, and this is another question I asked Tim Corbin, how do you deal with people disappointing you? And it was an interesting answer that he gave me. He said, you know, I used to be so caught up in that. He said, and don't take me the wrong way, I don't not care anymore. I just can't get emotionally involved with people disappointing me because it's going to happen. And I feel that way too. You have kids, parents, you know, that, you know, you just wish they would make a different decision, but they don't. And dealing with that on my end, dealing with that disappointment is still a challenge for me. You know, if you want to, it personally is a big challenge.
So I always ask guys like, hey, do you have any good recruiting stories? Do you have, you know, some funny ones or, you know, stuff? Some guys share things maybe they shouldn't share, but do you have any good recruiting stories for us?
Oh, I'm writing a book, Marty. I have plenty. We had a kid named JJ Metajevic. I'm sure he wouldn't mind me telling this story because we still laugh about it. But this kid was super talented hitter. He could really hit. Lefty kid from Norwin, Pennsylvania. And, but he was kind of cocky. He was kind of out of shape. So we have these meetings. I call them the good, the bad, and the ugly meetings. We sit down and, you know, picture this cocky kid that can really hit. He's thinking this meeting is going to be like, man, JJ, you're unbelievable. The meeting starts going in a different direction. I say, JJ, you're a one-tool player. You can really hit. What else can you do? You can't run. You can't throw. You can't field. And oh, by the way, are you in the best shape of your life? He goes, no. I said, no, you're not even close in the best shape of your life. And I looked at his dad and I said, he looks like the Pillsbury Doughboy. Well, JJ didn't really know what that meant, but his dad says, JJ, that wasn't a compliment, I promise you. Here's the best part of the story. JJ takes this information and is on a mission now to get in great shape, become a better fielder, become a better runner. I see him the next spring and he doesn't even look like the same kid. He literally looks like a pro. Long story short, JJ gets drafted out of high school, doesn't sign, goes to Arizona, has an amazing career at Arizona, gets drafted in the second or third round and is now in the Astros organization working his way to the big leagues. His dad still calls me every once in a while and says, I still remember that day, man, that changed JJ's trajectory. And, you know, that sticks with me because, first of all, it was brutal honesty. I didn't really sugarcoat anything, but he took that information and did exactly what he needed to do with it. So that was a fun one.
That the Pillsbury, he had to look the Pillsbury Doughboy up on YouTube or something.
He probably looked, I don't look anything like that little fat kid. but I give him so much credit because, you know, that's not what you want to hear, but in his case, it's what he needed to hear.
Sure. So I'm a parent, I'm a player, I'm looking for travel team. Why the US Elite program?
You know, again, it gets back to parents. Why US Elite? We are going to talk about life skills here a lot more than we are baseball. We get to play a baseball game for a while. We love it. But if you want your son to be influenced with things that are going to transcend long after baseball, US Elite's going to be a good fit for you. I always say we're attracting the people that want that, and we're repelling the people that don't. If there's people out there that don't want discipline, don't want to be held accountable, you know, are okay with double standards, we're not the program. We're not the program. We're just shy of the military, I would say, when it comes to, you know, how we're going to be regimented. And, you know, if you're late, you don't get to play. I mean, our kids have fun, but this is not for the faint at heart. You know, we have a successful track record. You know, if you look at the results of what we've done, it's pretty impressive. And I don't mean to sound like I'm bragging, but when I look at it, I go, wow, that's a lot of kids that have come through our program that are moving on to college and pro baseball. We got a good thing going. You know, I like the structure of our program. I like the way the teams are formed. I like the coaches that we attract because they're men of character. So I think there's a lot of things we're doing well. Doesn't mean we can't do better. Every year I look at that and say, man, next year's going to be even better than this year. So, but I think we have a lot to offer. I really do.
So as we're taping this, it's a baseball playoff. So who you got? Who you like?
You're gonna think I'm nuts when I tell you this. I am so busy. I can't follow it right now.
Oh man, that's rough.
As much of a baseball game, we got hundreds of kids in our program that, I mean, I don't want to sound like I'm a recluse, but we're focused so much on helping these kids right now. So I don't know.
I got you. Well, listen, Mark, I appreciate your time, man. I could talk a long time. I appreciate you letting us pick your brain for a little bit and sharing your knowledge of travel baseball and how it's impacting recruiting.
Well, it's been a pleasure. I love to share this information. I commend you, Marty, for doing this. I know you've had so many great guests, and sorry, I lost my, there, I'm back. You're doing a great job. You're bringing tremendous value to everybody. So I want to thank you.
All right, buddy. Hey, man, thanks. Have a good evening.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.